How business analysts found autonomy through Qlik, Tableau, and Power BI, and then began to lose it again. You may have heard of Gartner, the business technology research institution. Each year, they rank business technology platforms into a so-called magic quadrant. The four squares correspond to the following categories: niche players, visionaries, challengers, and leaders. And you want to be in the top right leader quadrant. Prior to 2011, the leader quadrant in business intelligence was occupied by products like IBM Business Objects and Crystal Reports, Oracle OBIE, and Microsoft Analysis Services, and then other traditional OLAP tools. But in 2011, a new tool, Qlik Text Qlik View, appeared in the leader quadrant. In 2013, Tableau also joined this esteemed club. And also in 2013, due to Power BI as opposed to their older tool SSAS, jumped up in the leader quadrant. For 3 years in a row, from 2016 to 2018, there were only 3 tools in this leader quadrant. And these tools continue to stay in that leader quadrant. So there's Qlik, Tableau, and Power BI, which is Microsoft. So why did all those other tools like IBM Cognos and Oracle OBIE and even the old Microsoft BI stack fall by the wayside during this time? The answer is that all 3 of these tools, Qlik, Tableau, and Power BI, had one thing in common. They could essentially replace an entire software stack and by extension, an entire team of expensive IT staff with a single tool and a single person. Switching from, say, Cognos to Qlik could not only provide massive cost savings, but could also drastically reduce risk by allowing business requirements to be easily prototyped and validated before a full build-out. Prior to 2011, if you want to build a dashboard that allows a business analyst to analyze customer transactions or other large data sets, you would need to do the following. And don't worry if you don't recognize these terms. The point is to show you how many layers there were and still are in many shops. So you'd need a database capable of analytic workloads like Teradata, and a DBA to manage that database. You would need an ETL tool like Informatica or DataStage and an ETL developer to build data pipelines to feed the data for your dashboards. You might need an OLAP server like Oracle Essbase or IBM Cognos TM1 to manage the business semantic layer of your dashboard, which is often needed for performance. You might need a front-end reporting tool or dashboard like SAP Crystal Reports or Business Objects. But you'd also, of course, need a dashboard developer. And on top of all of this, you'll probably need a business analyst to gather and interpret business requirements, a data warehouse architect to model the landing, staging, integration, and presentation layers of your data warehouse. You may need a solution architect to tie all of these components together, and you'll definitely need a project manager to drive out the project. So what I'm describing to you is essentially an IT systems project. And if you know anything about IT systems projects, they have a relatively high failure rate. The reason for this high failure rate is that it's difficult to validate business requirements because there's rarely budget set aside to build working prototypes. So with that in mind, how do tools like Qlik, Tableau, and Power BI change this dynamic? Well, the answer is that these tools essentially consolidate most of the functionality of a database, ETL tool, semantic layer tool, and dashboard into a single tool. And just as importantly, they leverage ultra-fast computer memory and CPU caches as opposed to persistent storage like hard disk drives or flash drives. Arguably, the main reason for this shift was due to a shift from 32-bit to 64-bit operating systems. In 2009, Windows 7 was released, and for the first time, a 64-bit operating system became dominant. Unlike the older 32-bit operating systems versions of Windows that only allowed applications to address up to 2 gigabytes of RAM, the new 64-bit Windows 7 computers could address up to 2 terabytes of RAM, a 1,000-fold increase. And with compression, it was now possible to easily store tens of millions of rows in memory. And what this means is that you can take a simple laptop and develop and implement a sustainable dashboard solution with so-called big data. And in turn, it's possible to prototype and validate business requirements as a key deliverable of the project itself. So in other words, a business intelligence project is no longer about gathering then implementing user requirements, but it's rather about discovering those business requirements through rapid feedback iterations. Now, this change in hardware and software was a huge game changer. The shift from 32-bit to 64-bit operating systems is similar to how we shifted from CPUs to GPUs in the name of AI and machine learning. It was a game changer for all these AI models that we use now. But it also meant that to be successful, you had to find a more sophisticated data developer. In the case of QlikView, which is what I favored, you needed to learn their scripting language, which is a little bit like SQL, but still different. You need to learn their associative data model, which is quite unique. There isn't really anything else out there like it. Their query expression language, which is also a bit novel, especially if you know nothing about set expressions. And this could take some time, maybe up to 18 months for full proficiency. But once you are at that level, a single person could run circles around an entire team using the old stacks. And that same person could not only reduce costs, but also de-risk projects because of their ability to validate requirements before fully implementing them. Oh, and there's another detail I should mention here. Because all of these tools load data in memory, by default, it makes them extremely responsive to the end user. So for example, in Qlik, most user filter selections or drill downs refresh in under a second. So a business analyst can really get into a flow state. While at the same time, a report in Cognos might take 20 seconds or longer to refresh. So the analyst might lose their train of thought and then go get a cup of coffee while they're waiting. So analysts naturally just gravitated towards this speedy user experience these new tools provided. Another advantage of these in-memory models is that they could easily load data from flat files like CSV documents or Excel workbooks. This meant that even if you couldn't easily build a pipeline into the source system, you could always take sample extracts in a flat file format and work with those extracts to build a working prototype to validate the business requirements. This feature also meant that you could get around data gatekeepers because it's always possible to request a one-off extract as opposed to going through onerous system access procedures. And that simple change could save weeks or months of elapsed time that might have been wasted on Byzantine onboarding process. From the perspective of business analysts, these tools were also a game changer in that someone who lacks any experience working with databases or data models can still build useful dashboards and reports. Now, this is why Tableau in particular became very popular and exploded onto the scene around 2013. Tableau had a very user-friendly drag-and-drop user interface whereby you could simply drag an Excel workbook into Tableau, and Tableau would make it really easy to build out dimensions and measures, like, for example, a date hierarchy with fields for year, month, week, and weekday. And you could easily build up measures showing, like, for example, a distinct count of customers or revenue from ad sales. And these basic modeling tasks create hierarchical dimensions and expression-driven measures are much easier to perform in Tableau than they are in Excel. So a relatively non-technical business analyst can perform some basic data modeling and dashboard design with virtually no training. And for this reason, Tableau was perceived by many of its users as something like an Apple product like the iPhone. But while Tableau was easy to learn and use, it had some limitations that made it difficult to scale. So there were technical limits as to what you could build with Tableau unless you were willing to work with IT to switch over and use a back-end database. Qlik, on the other hand, was much more scalable and less likely to require a back-end database, but it did require a more sophisticated user or developer to effectively wield. Eventually, QlikView was replaced with Qlik Sense, which effectively made Qlik about as user-friendly as Tableau is. But Tableau had already branded itself so effectively that it was really hard for Qlik to catch up in terms of branding. Meanwhile, Microsoft was working on a new tool of their own, originally codenamed Project Gemini, eventually released in 2010 as Power Pivot, along with another plugin for Excel called Power Query for data preparation. And after a couple failed attempts, starting with Power Pivot, followed by the defunct Power View, which was built on Silverlight, Microsoft eventually released their killer BI app, which was Power BI. And Power BI had many of the scalability benefits of Qlik Sense, while also including a user-friendly drag and drop interface, making it nearly as user-friendly as Tableau and Qlik. Most importantly, Power BI had the implicit support of IT, especially Microsoft-centric IT workers who were happy to stick another feather in their cap. It is difficult to overestimate the power of Microsoft when it comes to network effects. The business world runs on Microsoft Windows, Office, Azure, and M365, and Power BI was available to millions of users and developers. So it actually doesn't need to be as good as Qlik or Tableau, it only needs to be good enough. And voila, Power BI has become the world's most popular BI tool, surpassing both Qlik and Tableau. And this is also clearly visible in the latest 2024 Gartner Magic BI Quadrant, where you can see Microsoft is way up to the top right and is effectively separated from the pack. So, having said all of this, how is it that business analysts found and then began losing autonomy with these tools? Well, the answer is sponsorship and control of these tools shifted from various business departments back to a central IT authority. Now, while those early adopter business analysts were possibly being lauded as rock stars or ninjas, and perhaps even getting promotions, IT was quietly fretting over supporting new desktop tools, over possibly supporting a new server, and over the possibility of data breaches. IT is first and foremost concerned with security and stability, and anytime there's new software and new jobs running, by default responsibility falls on IT. So once the writing was on the wall, IT staff began to embrace technologies like Qlik and Tableau, and most especially Power BI. Once IT got ahead of this new 8-ball, a regression to the mean soon followed. And what I mean by that is the development of new reports or dashboards, is now again perceived as the purview of IT, or a centralized business intelligence technology group, as opposed to something driven directly by individual business units. So many business managers and business analysts actually prefer this mode of working. They're often not interested in ninjas or rock stars, and like IT, are simply interested in maintaining stability and security, especially if their reporting needs are routine and rarely change. But from time to time, or from manager to manager, this can change. For example, if there's a new program or system or campaign that has been launched, there may be a scramble to understand the impacts of that new thing. Another scenario that might demand business urgency is when there is a system migration involving customers or employees or other assets that require speedy and detailed reconciliations, a common type of analysis, and those reconciliations may need to be constantly tweaked and refreshed. In these situations, business analysts cannot wait for IT to build a dashboard or report and may only need that dashboard or report for a brief period of time. So there'll always be motivations to centralize reporting, but occasionally priorities will shift in favor of business analyst autonomy. The good news is that there is a new breed of technologies that's arrived over the past few years, which is once again leading to business analyst autonomy. I refer to these platforms as analytic workspace platforms, and examples of these platforms include Microsoft Data Fabric, Snowflake, Google BigQuery, and EasyMorph. In my next video, I'm going to explain the benefits of these new platforms and how we can negotiate these new pathways. I'm Neil Hepburn. I'm a Gen AI-oriented data architect consultant with over 30 years experience specializing in business analytics and business outcomes. I can provide architectural guidance, user training, and mentorship, and I can be reached for consulting contracting at neilhepburnjob@gmail.com. That's all, folks.